The sky over Dry Creek had turned the color of old copper, burned by the sinking sun. Wind moved through brittle brush like a whisper of ghosts, and goats bleated softly in their pens, uneasy without knowing why. Silas Morrow stood near the fence with a rusted pail in one hand, his eyes scanning the horizon. He'd lived long enough on this land to know when something wasn't right. The silence had gone too deep. He set the pail down without a sound and walked slowly toward the feed shed. His left leg dragged faintly, a gift from a bullet years ago that still rattled in the bone. The door stood slightly ajar. Not enough to draw notice to most, but Silas was not most men. He pushed it open without rush, letting the hinges groan. There, crouched low beside the goat feed sack, was a child, no more than 13 by the shape of her. Ragged dress, bare feet mottled with dust and scab, hair tangled like weeds after a storm. She froze when she saw him, hand still gripping a scoop of grain, her chest rising in short, shallow bursts. Silas didn't speak. He only watched her, expression unreadable, letting the silence stretch and weigh on her like judgment. The girl's lips parted. No sound came. She looked toward the door, as if gauging how fast she might run. "You hungry?" His voice was dry as cracked wood. The question hung there, soft and unnatural, as if the moment demanded a shout instead. She stared, didn't nod, didn't answer. He stepped back from the doorway and gestured toward the house. "Come on, then." Still she didn't move. "I ain't gonna shoot you for feed," he added flatly. It was that line, somehow, that broke the spell. She rose slow, grain spilling from her hand, eyes on him the whole way. She walked like someone used to punishment, not welcome. When she passed him, she flinched, expecting a blow that never came. The fire inside the house was already down to coals, but Silas stoked it back to life. The warmth filled the room in slow breaths. He took bread from the pantry, hard but still good, and cut a piece. No butter, no questions. She ate like a creature half-starved, eyes darting between bites. When he handed her a second slice, her hand shook. She muttered something too soft to hear. "What was that?" he asked, more curious than stern. She shook her head. "Nothing. Name." Silence. He let it be. Took his place in the rocking chair near the fire, watching it flicker in the hearth. The girl sat cross-legged on the floor, back close to the stone, soaking in heat, like it might run from her if she turned away. An hour passed. The light faded entirely outside. Owls called from the cottonwoods. The girl didn't speak, didn't cry. She just watched the fire, with a look far older than her face. "You on your own?" he asked. She nodded barely. "Long?" She didn't answer that. Silas sighed. He had no wish to draw out stories, not ready to be told. He'd spent enough nights beside men who carried silence like a wound. Some folks bled where it showed. Others bled inward. He fetched a blanket from the cedar chest, folded it neatly, and laid it on the floor beside her. She eyed it like a trap. "You can sleep by the fire. Floor's warmer than outside." Her voice finally came. It was hoarse. "I can go." "You could. But you ain't." She swallowed and looked at the blanket again, then at him. "Why?" He looked toward the window, where the desert stretched endless and dark. "Because someone ought to, now and then." The wind picked up outside, rattling the wood siding. Coyotes yelped in the hills. She curled tighter under the blanket, eyes wide but not afraid. Just alert. He stayed in his chair, staring at the fire, the rocking creaking faintly beneath him. The air smelled of ash and goat musk and something else, something new. Not perfume or dirt, but a kind of unrest. Like trouble had snuck into his house under another man's name. He didn't ask more questions. He figured they'd come when they were ready. Hours later, while she slept, he took another look outside. Just a ranch and stars and the echo of wind, but something in him knew. Trouble didn't always ride up with noise. Sometimes it sent ahead a whisper. And tonight, it had arrived in bare feet and stolen feet. He watched the moon climb slow over the canyon, then turned back inside and closed the door gently behind him. The fire crackled low, throwing long shadows across the floor. The girl stirred but didn't wake. Silas poured a cup of cold coffee and sat back down. He didn't say it aloud, But the word sat heavy in his throat, daughter. It wasn't true. Not by blood or name. But it hung there, like the first snow in the mountains, unexpected, undeniable, and changing everything it touched. By the time the sun began to dip again the next day, long and copper-colored shadows bled across the valley floor. Silas was in the barn repairing a busted latch when he heard the low thunder of hooves, not frantic like stampede or gallop, but slow, deliberate, and coming straight down the ridge road. He stood, wiped his hands on his coat, and stepped out into the open. His goats had already gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. The girl was sitting by the goat pen, stroking a kid with her sleeve pulled down over one bruised wrist. When she saw Silas stop mid-step, her body tensed. She looked to where his gaze had gone and paled. 3 riders crested the ridge, silhouettes black against the red sky. No dust behind them. That meant they'd come careful, slow, not to be seen until it was too late. Silas counted 2 rifles, one slung low across a saddle horn, the other already resting across a man's lap. The third man, broad-shouldered, long coat dragging the stirrups, held nothing. Yet, they rode like they owned the ground beneath them. Men used to taking. Inside, Silas said quietly to the girl. She didn't move. Now, she rose and ran for the house, without another word. The riders came to a stop a dozen yards from the barn. Silas didn't move. His rifle leaned just inside the barn door. 3 steps too far to matter now. He could lie about it later if it came to that. Or not. The one in the middle grinned. Gold tooth, red scarf, beard trimmed sharp like he was still aiming to impress someone. "Evenin', old man," he called. Silas nodded once. "Evenin', that. We're looking for someone. Figured you'd be neighborly enough to say if you seen her." Silas didn't blink. Girl about yay high. Dirt on her dress. Scared as hell? The man's smile tightened. That'd be the one. "You ain't her kin." The second man snorted, then spit a wad of tobacco. "She took from us," he said. "She's got paying to do." Silas didn't ask what. Didn't care. It didn't take much for men like this to invent reasons. "She came through last night," Silas said, voice even. Didn't say where she was headed. The leader tilted his head. "That's so." "Wouldn't lie to men of the law," Silas added. The third rider let out a short laugh. "Ain't no badge on us, Pops." "Then I ain't obliged." The man's grin slid into something colder. "We aim to look around." Silas took one step forward, slow and limping. "Ain't no one keeping you from it," he said. "Just know, I'm not going to forget where you stepped if you do." For a moment, none of them moved. The leader dismounted, hand resting casually near the holster at his side. His boots hit the dust soft. He walked forward a few paces and took off his hat, brushing at the brim with long fingers. "You used to be someone, didn't you?" he asked. "Name like Morrow rings a bell." Silas didn't answer. The man nodded to himself. "Yeah, you were Pinkerton once, weren't you? Or maybe something dirtier. Heard you shot a man through a church window in Carson City." "That's so," Silas said. "That's what they say." "Funny. I was never in Carson." The man smiled again. "Still, you walk like a man who's ended more than he's forgotten." Silas didn't blink. "And you talk like a man who's about to overstay his welcome." The tension snapped tight. The rider's hand twitched, but didn't rise. Behind Silas, the front door of the house creaked open. A soft breath of wind. Then the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being cocked. The girl stood in the doorway. The old double barrel hung awkward in her small hands, aimed mostly true. The second rider raised his rifle halfway. "You teach her that, old man?" "No," Silas said, eyes still on the leader. "Looks like she taught herself." The leader chuckled, low and dry. "All right then." He turned and walked back to his horse, calm as a preacher after a sermon. Swung into the saddle in one smooth motion. "You keep her," he said, not even looking back. "But she's bad luck. That one's fire wrapped in skin. Sooner or later, she'll burn you too." "I've been burned before," Silas muttered. The 3 riders turned and disappeared over the ridge. Not a word more spoken. Silas waited until the sound of their horses had faded to dust and memory. Only then did he turn back to the girl. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. She swallowed, lowering the shotgun. They were going to kill you. Or worse. But that gun's more kick than you got shoulder. She looked down, ashamed. I thought if I looked like I could. You did fine, he said, walking toward her and gently taking the weapon from her hands. You did more than fine. He leaned it against the doorframe, then looked out again toward the ridge. The sky was darker now, lit only by fading embers of day. They'll be back, he said quietly. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. We'll be ready, she answered. It was 2 nights after the riders vanished over the ridge that Silas woke in the dark, heart pounding like hoofbeats. Not from sound, from instinct, the kind honed in dirt camps and blood-soaked fields long before this valley ever knew peace. He rose slow, careful not to wake the girl, and eased the door open. The wind was up again, cold and full of old voices. It whispered through the cottonwoods, rattling loose a memory he hadn't touched in years. He lit no lantern, just slipped on his coat and stepped into the dark, boots sinking into soft earth. His hand found the long rifle near the porch, and it felt like part of him, like it never left. The barn door creaked. Inside, the goat stirred. But that wasn't what drew him. There, in the far corner, someone had disturbed the dust. A boot print. Fresh. He knelt. Same shape as the ones from 2 nights back. He rose slowly and stepped out, circling wide around the barn and heading toward the old war trail that ran beyond the edge of the property, invisible to those who hadn't once ridden it with their life staked on silence. He followed the print for a while, where dust turned to hard-packed rock, and waited. Minutes passed. Then, like a breath held too long movement, a glint, just a flicker, beyond the line of cottonwoods. Someone was watching. He stepped into the open, calm as dusk. You left something, he called. Silence. Then the brush parted. But it wasn't the red-scarfed outlaw this time. It wasn't any of the 3 men who'd ridden and so bold. It was a boy, no older than 16. Thin, dust-covered, with a busted nose and a rifle that shook in both hands. Silas didn't lower his own, but he didn't raise it either. Who sent you? He asked. No one, the boy rasped. I came on my own. You rode with them, though. The boy hesitated. I didn't know what they were. Not at first. They said we was just collecting debts. Silas looked him over. The fear wasn't fake, but neither was the guilt. You saw what they did. I saw enough. Silas took 1 step forward. Why come back? The boy swallowed hard. Because she ain't what they said. The girl. No, Silas said. She's not. I thought maybe I could warn you. Too late for that. The boy lowered his rifle. They're coming back. Tomorrow night. Said if she wasn't waiting on the post fence, they'd burn the whole valley. Start with your goats. Silas breathed slow through his nose. They got a new man with them now. The boy went on. One with scars down his cheek. They say he cut up soldiers at Shiloh and laughed doing it. Tell me something useful, Silas said. Like where they'll camp. The boy hesitated again. Then, there's a bend in the canyon road, 5 miles east. Shallow cave under the rocks. They've been sleeping there. Silas nodded. Why tell me? He asked. The boy looked away. Because I can't take it back. What I did. But maybe I can make it worse for them than it is for me. Silas studied him for a long while. You run now, he said finally. Run far and don't stop. The boy didn't argue. He turned and vanished into the brush. Silas stood in the dark for a long moment more before turning back toward the house. She was already on the porch. How much did you hear? Enough, she said. You still want to stay? The girl looked at him, eyes wide, voice steady. You fed me. That makes us family. He stared at her, then nodded once. Then we've got a night left. Inside, the house smelled of oil and powder soon after. Silas brought out the old things, shells wrapped in cloth, a knife too clean for farm work, an oilskin pouch full of cartridges meant for trouble. She helped where she could, holding the lantern, loading slow, careful. What did you do before all this? She asked once, not looking at him. Silas didn't answer right away. I did what men like them thought they could do better. he said at last. Kill. Protect. But you killed, didn't you? He looked up. Only when there was no other choice. She nodded slowly. Then, tomorrow, will it come to that again? Silas looked at her, this girl who'd stolen feed, and now sat beside a fire polishing bullets. It always comes to that, he said. But what he didn't say hung heavier than the words. This time, it wouldn't just be him drawing iron. This time, a girl he didn't ask for but had somehow begun to care about might stand beside him. And that changed everything. At first light, the canyon held its breath. Silas stood atop the ridge overlooking the shallow bend, where the cave mouth yawned like a cracked tooth in the rock. He could see them now. 3 riders and a 4th crouched by the fire. One of them, the big one with the red scarf, was cleaning his pistol with the leisure born of confidence. Another sat sharpening a Bowie knife, his scarred cheek twitching with each stroke. The girl had described them right. Cruel men who weren't just chasing coin. They liked to hunt. Behind Silas, down the rise and hidden in the sagebrush, the girl waited with the rifle he'd taught her to load. She was no marksman, but she had steady hands and a quiet fury that made her eyes shine cold. They had prepared all night, laying out a path through the brush that the goats would be driven down if things went wrong. He'd packed a saddlebag with jerky cartridges and the old wedding band he hadn't worn since the war. He hadn't told her about that last one. Some memories were just meant to burn quietly in a man's pocket. He moved before the sun cleared the rocks, gliding down the ridge with the silence of a scout and the mind of a soldier. A wind kicked up dust behind him, and with it came voices. Just take the girl, Red Scarf was saying. Shoot the old man if he gets brave. And the goats? The boy with the nervous eyes asked. Let him run, said the man with the scar. The girl's worth more than a whole ranch. Silas waited until they were halfway through their tin coffee before stepping into view. Rifles jerked up. Easy, boys, Silas said, calm as Dry Creek water. You came looking for someone. I figured I'd save you the trouble. They stared, not quite believing the old man had walked straight into their den. Red Scarf rose. Where's the girl? She ain't yours to take, Silas said. The man with the scar sneered. You think one old hand can stop 4 guns? Silas tilted his head. You boys brought 4. They didn't notice at first. The missing horse, the silence behind them. Then a crack tore through the air, sharp clean. The boy with the nervous hands dropped, screaming, his leg torn open. From the brush above, the girl racked the bolt again, just like he showed her. Silas moved before the others could blink. He dropped to a knee, aimed and fired. Red Scarf staggered back, shoulder shattered, gun tumbling from his grasp. The scarred man turned to charge, but Silas was faster. His second shot caught the outlaw square in the gut, sending him into the dust with a choked gasp. Only one remained, a rider who hadn't drawn yet. Young. Too young. He raised his hands. Silas didn't shoot. Instead, he walked forward, rifle still trained. You ride with them, Silas said, but you didn't fire. The boy nodded, shaking. I didn't want to. You want to live? Yes, sir. Then drop your belt, take your boots, and walk that way until the sun sets. If I see your face again, I won't ask questions next time. The boy didn't hesitate. By the time the sun kissed the top of the ridge, he was a shadow on the plain. Silas turned back. Red Scarf writhed in the dirt. The man with the gut wound no longer moved. The girl emerged from the brush, rifle trembling in her hands. You hit the leg, Silas said. Not bad. She looked pale, but she nodded. He's alive. For now. She stared at the wounded outlaw, then looked up at Silas. What happens now? Silas glanced toward the trail. We take the goats to the south field. Burn the cave so no one else uses it. Then we go home. The girl looked at the wounded men again. And them. Silas walked over and took the outlaw's pistols, tossing them into the ravine. He leaned close to Red Scarf. You ride into a man's home looking to take what's his, he said, voice low and heavy. You better be ready for him to take everything back. Red Scarf spat blood and rolled over. Silas straightened. They'll live, he told the girl, but they'll ride slow and crooked the rest of their days. They rode back in silence, the sun warm on their backs, the trail behind them quiet. That night, Silas lit the fire early. The air was cool again, but not sharp like before. The wind had changed. So had the girl. She sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her, spooning stew from an old tin bowl. "You were a soldier," she said, not asking. "I was." "You didn't want to be." "No, but you did what needed doing." Silas nodded. "And I'll keep doing it, long as I got reason." She looked down. "I ain't your daughter." He stirred the coals gently. "Don't need to be to stay." She was quiet a long while. Then she said, "You could have left me. That night in the shed." "I could have." "Why didn't you?" He looked at her, this girl who had nothing, who had stolen feed, and now stood tall as any soul he'd fought beside. "Because you were cold," he said, "and because someone once did the same for me." She set her bowl down. "Then I'll stay. Till you tell me not to." He didn't answer, just added another log to the fire. The warmth stretched between them. Outside, the goats bleated soft in the barn. The wind rustled the trees. And somewhere far beyond, the last ghosts of the war trail faded into silence. Inside, by firelight, he looked at her one last time that night and said, "Stay tonight, daughter." And she did.